Today we're tackling a fascinating book. It's called Re-engineering Philosophy for Limited Beings, Piecewise Approximations to Reality. And get this, we've got the author, William C. Wimsatt himself here to guide us through it.
It's great to be here.
Now this book, I have to admit, it's not exactly light reading. It's a collection of your most important essays from the last 3 decades. But that's what makes this deep dive so special. It's like a concentrated dose of your thinking about some really big questions, like how we as humans even begin to understand a world that's so incredibly complex. So let's get right to it. If you had to pick just one impactful takeaway from all these years of your work, what would it be?
But if I had to distill it down, I'd say it's this. We're limited beings, trying to make sense of a limitless universe. And that simple fact, it shapes not only how we approach knowledge, but also the kinds of knowledge we end up with.
You know, it's funny. I was thinking about all those times I'm searching for my lost keys, and I checked the same drawer like 3 times, even though they're obviously not there. Is that what you're getting at with the idea of heuristics?
Heuristics are like mental shortcuts, our brain's way of saving energy, and trying a familiar path. They work most of the time, but they can also lead us astray in pretty predictable ways.
So it's like my brain is using a faulty algorithm or something.
Exactly. It's like a set of instructions, but sometimes the instructions are a bit buggy.
Okay, I'm starting to get this. But why should I, as a non-scientist, care about heuristics?
Well, because heuristics are everywhere. They're in every decision we make. Think about how you choose what to eat, what to buy, who to trust. We rarely have the time or energy to analyze every bit of information, so we rely on these mental shortcuts. It's how our brains evolved, to cope with a complex world. But the problem is, sometimes those shortcuts lead to systematic errors.
So it's like those optical illusions, where your brain tricks you into seeing something that's not really there.
Exactly. Our brains are wired to see patterns, to make quick judgments, even if those judgments aren't always accurate. And the thing is, these errors aren't random. They follow predictable patterns.
So we can actually learn to recognize them.
Exactly.
So how does this all tie back to science?
Well, just like we use heuristics in our daily lives, scientists use them too. And sometimes those heuristics lead to flawed models. Like in the early days of genetics, researchers thought that chromosomes were linear.
Interesting.
But as they gathered more evidence, they realized that was an oversimplification, a kind of good enough for now model that helped them make progress.
It's like using a rough sketch to get the basic idea before you start painting the full picture.
Precisely. And those early gene maps, even with their flaws, they were a crucial stepping stone. They allowed scientists to start mapping genes, understanding their relationships, and eventually building more accurate models.
This is blowing my mind. So even being wrong can move science forward.
Absolutely. It highlights the importance of what I call robustness, which is a key theme in the book.
All right, let's unpack this robustness thing. What does that even mean?
Okay, think of it this way. Imagine you're trying to solve a mystery. Would you rather have one witness, even if they seem very confident, or multiple witnesses who might have slightly different perspectives, but agree on the core facts?
Multiple witnesses, for sure.
Right, because robustness is all about seeking out independent lines of evidence that converge on the same conclusion.
I see what you're saying. It's like a safety net.
Exactly.
If one approach has a flaw, another might catch it.
Yeah.
It's about looking at things from different angles.
That's a great analogy, but there's a catch. Sometimes what looks like robust evidence is actually what we call pseudo-robustness.
Pseudo-robustness.
It's like having multiple witnesses who all heard the same false rumor. They agree, but they're all wrong.
Okay. So how do we tell the difference?
Well, it happens when the different lines of evidence share the same underlying bias or flawed assumption.
Can you give me an example?
Sure, take the early models of group selection in evolutionary biology. Many of these models assumed that individuals from different groups mixed randomly when they migrated. This assumption made the models mathematically simpler, but it also made it almost impossible for group selection to show up in the results.
So the models themselves were technically correct, but the underlying assumptions skewed the findings.
Exactly. And this led to a false sense of certainty about the absence of group selection. It's a reminder that we always need to be critical of our methods and be aware of their limitations and potential biases.
This is all connecting now. So we've got heuristics, those mental shortcuts we all use, sometimes leading to flawed models. But then we have robustness, this idea of seeking multiple independent lines of evidence, which can help us spot those flaws and get closer to the truth. But then you're also saying that even with robustness, We have to be careful about hidden biases that can create this illusion of certainty.
Exactly. And this brings us to another big idea in the book: complexity.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. I always struggled with understanding complex systems, but the way you're explaining it is making it click for me.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. And it's precisely because the world is so complex that we need these tools of heuristics and robustness.
Okay, I'm ready to dive into complexity. Let's do this.
So one of the key insights I've gained over the years is that nature isn't just a collection of individual parts interacting randomly, it's organized in levels, with each level building upon the one below it.
Okay, that makes sense. But how does this idea of levels challenge the traditional reductionist view? The idea of breaking things down to their smallest components to understand them?
It challenges reductionism by showing that the whole is often greater than the sum of its parts. When you have different levels of organization, new properties and behaviors emerge that you wouldn't predict just by studying the individual components in isolation. This is what we call emergence.
Emergence. Okay,
Yeah.
I have to admit, that sounds a bit abstract. Can you give me a real-world example? Why should I, as an everyday person, care about emergence?
Absolutely. Think about a flock of birds. Each bird is just flying, responding to its neighbors in the environment. But when you put hundreds of birds together,
Right.
suddenly these beautiful, complex patterns emerge. The flock moves as a single unit, swirling and shifting in ways that you couldn't predict, just by studying a single bird.
Wow, that's a great visual. I
Yeah.
can totally see that. But are there examples of emergence that are closer to my everyday life?
Of course. Think about the economy. You can't predict the behavior of the entire economy just by studying individual consumers or businesses, their interactions, the flow of money, goods, and information. All of these create emergent properties that drive the system in ways that are impossible to predict from the bottom up.
So you're saying that emergence is about understanding how those interactions between individual parts create something entirely new and unpredictable.
Precisely. And it's not just in economics. You see it in social dynamics, too. The way rumors spread, the formation of social groups, the rise and fall of trends. These are all emergent phenomena.
Now that you're mentioning it, it's everywhere. So if the world is this complex web of interconnected systems, with all these emergent properties, does that mean reductionism is completely useless?
Not at all. Reductionism is still a powerful tool. Think of it as a powerful lens that allows us to zoom in and study the mechanisms at play. It might not give us the complete picture, but it can reveal important insights that we can then use to build more nuanced, holistic theories.
Okay, I'm starting to see how these ideas fit together. It's like reductionism helps us understand the individual ingredients, while emergence shows us how those ingredients combine to create something entirely new.
That's a great way to put it. And this brings us back to the idea of heuristics and robustness. We need those tools because the world is so complex that we can't possibly grasp it all at once.
It's like we're trying to assemble this giant jigsaw puzzle,
Mm.
but we only have a few pieces at a time. We need those mental shortcuts, multiple perspectives, to figure out where each piece fits.
Exactly. And that's why I believe it's so important to acknowledge our limitations. As limited beings, trying to understand a vast and complex universe.
This has been an incredibly eye-opening conversation. I feel like I'm starting to see the world in a whole new light.
I'm glad to hear that. And that's really the goal of my work, to help people appreciate the beauty and complexity of the world, while recognizing the limitations of our own understanding.
I have to say, one of the biggest aha moments for me was this idea that even flawed models can be valuable stepping stones to truer theories. It's like those early gene maps we talked about. They weren't entirely accurate, but they paved the way for more sophisticated models down the line.
It's a beautiful way to think about progress. It's not always a straight line. It's a winding path with unexpected detours and dead ends, but ultimately it leads us closer to a deeper understanding.
I love that. It makes me think that maybe those imperfections, those limitations we have as humans, are actually what make the journey so fascinating.
That's a profound thought. And it underscores the importance of intellectual humility, of acknowledging that we don't have all the answers, and that's okay. It's the journey of exploration and discovery that truly matters.
Thank you so much for sharing your insights with us today. It's been a true privilege.
It's been my pleasure.
And to our listeners, we leave you with this. Think about the heuristics you use in your own life. Are there places where those mental shortcuts might be leading you astray? And where might seeking out diverse perspectives, that robustness we talked about, help you gain a clearer view of the truth? Keep questioning, keep exploring, and keep diving deep.
You know, it's funny, after talking with you, I'm realizing that thinking like a scientist, it's not just for, academics in labs or something. It's like a way of approaching the world, being curious, asking questions, and being open to new ideas, even if they challenge our assumptions.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to put it.
It's about embracing the fact that we're limited beings, as you say,
Mm.
but still capable of these amazing discoveries. When we use the right tools, it is. It's about recognizing that you know. Knowledge isn't about having all the answers. It's about understanding how we know what we know, the limitations of our methods, and, the ever-present possibility of being wrong.
Right. It's like that famous quote, the only true wisdom is knowing you know nothing. I never really understood that before, but now it's starting to click.
It's true.
Embracing our limitations actually opens us up to learning so much more.
Exactly. And that's the exciting part. It's a journey of constant discovery, of refining our understanding and building upon the work of those who came before us. Even our mistakes can become stepping stones, for future breakthroughs.
It's really inspiring. Thank you again for taking us on this incredible deep dive. I know I'm going to be thinking about these ideas for a long time.
The pleasure was all mine.
And to our listeners, that's it for our deep dive into re-engineering philosophy for limited beings. It's a really thought-provoking book, and we encourage you to check it out for yourselves if you're interested in exploring these ideas further. Until next time, keep questioning, keep exploring, and keep diving deep